Technology Center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
And we're back. And we're getting into our first conversation for today, your COVID-19 update. And today we're checking in on the bus transportation that is taking place across the country, now allowed since the start of the week. So we have with us, joining us from Boom this morning, Ewart Metzgen, who is the Secretary of the Belize Bus Association. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Well, thank you for waking up early and joining us.
Really, this is a regular routine for me. Sometimes from 5 in the morning, I'm up.
Yeah.
Nothing better to do.
Ewart, let's get into the conversation. So, the public transportation was allowed to resume starting the beginning of this week. How have things been going so far?
Well, it has resumed, but it's just basically it's not everybody that is running. It's just a few buses. We have, I think, 4 buses coming from the south. From the west, we have about 5 or 6 buses. Going north, we have 4 buses going north and returning the same way. So the same buses that leave, like say the 4 buses that leave from Benke, those are the buses that go back in the afternoon. And it's the same thing from the north and the south.
So you said that not all the buses are running. Is this an individual business decision? People are deciding whether or not it's worthwhile for them to be running?
Yeah, you could put it like that because we still have the curfew on whereby the police can stop these buses and ask people what's their reason for being out, no? And most businesses are still closed, so it's not that much passengers that are people that are traveling, no? So it's not financially feasible for everybody to be out there running. Yeah. And like the minister told us that the government was not in any position to assist bus operators. So those smaller companies that couldn't stand the blunt of what's taking place, they're the ones that are parked now. Yeah. And the larger ones that could handle it are out there.
So that was actually the biggest concern from the bus association before we went into the lockdown phase and you weren't allowed to move anyway. You had given an estimate to say that based on fuel prices at that time and the capacity that you were taking, that you weren't going to be able to sustain having the number of runs. So 2 things have happened. One, public transportation is allowed to be opened once again, but we've also seen a drop in some of the fuel costs. How has that impacted the capacity of the bus owners to be able to continue the transportation?
Well, really, the diesel was at the same $8.25 a gallon before we were stopped from running. It had before, about a week or so before that, it had gone on from 9, I think it was at 9.38 or 9.36, somewhere there. Then it went to the 8.25 that it was in the city. That helps a bit, but still with less people traveling, you're still kind of struggling to really cover just basic costs. Because right now, those that are out there running, they're just basically covering the driver, the conductor, and to buy fuel to have the bus back out there again for tomorrow.
So you said you're not earning as much because you don't have as many people moving. What's the capacity that is allowed on the bus? Because we have to maintain social distance as well.
That is true, but the ministry had said that because we were complaining about the 1 person per seat that they initially said we were to be doing, we were saying if we were to do that we won't be able to cover our cost. So they told us we can take a seated bus, but everybody must be wearing masks. You have to have them sanitize their hands and stuff like that before they get in the bus. when you reach a terminal, everybody comes up and you sanitize the bus and everybody gets back on. But like I said, even with that, people aren't moving. Most jobs are closed, businesses are closed down, so people aren't moving around.
And have you found that your talks with the government and the Ministry of Transport, have they been very clear in terms of what they would be requiring of the bus association or the buses in order for them to run, in terms of the guidelines that they do actually have to enforce?
Yeah, they had asked us to see that we had the cleaning stuff on board the bus to wipe our seats and keep the bus properly sanitized, stuff like that. And we've been doing that as was asked of us now.
But it's very specific. It speaks of, so let's talk about what the new conditions are for the buses to be able to run. One, passengers are asked to wash their hands or sanitize their hands before they get on the bus. They must also wear a mask. Your bus driver and conductors must also wear masks. What other guidelines do you have to implement? Because the cleaning, I think, is supposed to take place between every run as well.
Yes, before you leave before you enter the terminal, your bus is supposed to be clean. And each stop you make, like for those in the north, we stop in Orange Walk, and then in Corozal. So we've got to clean the buses in Orange Walk and in Corozal before we have passengers go on.
Okay. Yeah. And any other regulation that's in place?
Well, it's just for us not to be overcrowding the buses, but even if we wanted to do that, there's not sufficient people to do that.
And has No, you can continue, sorry.
No, I just want to say, most of operators they themselves are protecting their employees and their workers. And one of the things we noted was, and we've been asking our drivers and conductors if there's somebody that is in any of the terminals and those persons are sneezing and stuff like that. The government said those persons are not supposed to board the buses because they can infect other people. So we are asking conductors to when you see people like that, to just talk to them in a nice manner and let them know why it is that we can't allow them on the buses.
And has complying with the new regulations added another layer of difficulty for operation? Because, there's already less people traveling. Now you have to do additional cleaning. You have to have additional supplies for your conductors and the drivers. So I would imagine that sometimes it's very difficult to enforce, especially when there's less passengers and there's less money being earned.
The part of getting the supplies and stuff like that is just an additional cost to operators, but we see it as something that's necessary in order to protect our workers and those that are traveling on the buses with us. So everything that has been asked of us to do, it's necessary, and although it may bring a little bit more difficulty on us, but we're doing it because we ourselves see where it's necessary, not only for ourselves but for the people that work with us and those that ride on the buses.
Now, the people who are moving at this time, they're essential workers or they're moving to approved businesses. What would you say is the average capacity that is being filled on each of these runs? Are you at 50%, 80%? What are you looking at?
Right now, I'd say around 30-35%. I can only speak for those from the BBOC because I am directly connected to them. And so I say between 30-35% capacity.
So if you're running with 30% of the passengers that you normally get, what is the long-term sustainability of being able to maintain constant transportation?
We are we're hoping and we're keeping our fingers crossed that with the buses now moving and they're moving fuel and stock, that when the new stock of fuel comes in, that the cost of fuel will go even lower, which will be able to again help us to maneuver ourselves a bit more. But currently, let's see, about another week or, well, I say about 2 3 weeks, we can continue this way before some of us start making decisions on whether or not we should continue.
And of course, if the fuel prices fall between now and then you'd be able to go for longer.
Yeah, we can probably, we'll be able to sustain and go on until things pick up, or until we come back to somewhat of some normalcy with businesses reopening and workers moving around again.
And in terms of the number of runs that are in place right now, has there been any sort of modification to the schedule or the amount of buses that are running currently?
The schedule basically is the same as it was before we were closed off completely. So it's just basically we have countrywide totally, I'd say about 20 buses on our national highways that are running between Belize City, the south, the west, and the north. So it's just basically like I'd say about 5 or 10% of what we normally have on the road that's on the road right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was asking because, of course, a lot of, if not the majority of people do rely on public transportation. And especially, this is especially important when we consider that a lot of people do commute from between the different districts a lot of the time for work. And a lot of the time persons who may be living in the rural areas especially need to rely on bus transportation to get to and from, whether it's the towns or to get to another part of the country. So I'm wondering if maybe you've heard any feedback from customers in terms of how the new restrictions have affected the ability of them to travel around and the ability of you to offer service. Have you heard any sort of feedback?
Well, I'll talk. I could talk on myself because for the village part, for the village runs, I have a bus run that leaves out of Boom, and I've not been doing that for maybe almost a month now. Again, that wasn't feasible because some days I would leave. I live in the Freshman area of Boom. I'd probably leave back here with maybe about 8 to 10 passengers and maybe pick up 3 4 more in Boom. And that it's just not it's not cost effective to do that right now because most of the people that work from Boom, the businesses that they work with are closed.
Yes.
So it's not feasible right now. What I'm trying to do for my people here in Freshman and for those in Boom that have been calling me is to try and arrange to see if at least twice a week I can go into the city to take them, for them to buy whatever it is that they need, or they need to go to the pharmacy or whatever. So I'll try to get that worked out by this week.
Yeah.
And so I can do that twice a week for them.
No, I can only imagine. I think for some of the villages that rely on public transportation to move around, there are always things that you need to come into the city or the town for at some point or the other. So even exploring things like a once a week run would be helpful. But Ewart, let's look at the responsibilities that are being placed on the bus companies. What's the level of enforcement that you have as a bus owner over your employees? Because this is a safety issue primarily. This is about the health and safety of the nation. So when you send your buses out on a run, whether they're full or 50 or 30%, they are kind of the watchful eye to ensure that the sanitization process is happening from the hand washing, to the cleaning in between, to the enforcement of masks. We've heard stories where conductors are saying, oh, just put on your mask when you reach the bus stop. I'm at the checkpoint. How are you ensuring that they understand the seriousness of this?
For us, we can only speak to the people on board the buses and ask them to please follow regulations, because it's not only for their own safety, but for that of the driver and the conductor, because the same way they have to go home to their families after working or doing whatever it is that they go to do when they travel on the buses, our driver and our conductors, they have to also go home to their families. And we ask our drivers and our conductors to always have on their face masks. Yeah. And in some cases, for the conductors, when they're dealing with money, we ask them to use gloves.
Yes.
On my part, I give my conductors a glove to put on when collecting money from people. And most of us at the BBOC, that is what we're doing. But like I said, I mean, we can only speak to the passengers when they board the buses and ask them to please keep the face mask on their face at all times, because it's protecting them and also protecting us and our families.
Yeah. Have you run into any situations where you have had to turn back passengers because they don't have the correct protective gear?
I have not heard of any situation like that so far from any of the operators.
Okay. So that means at least people are aware of what it takes to be able to travel on public transportation. And
since we started Sunday, we've not been having any problem or issues with people not wearing masks.
Mm-hmm. And the Ministry of Health had raised some concerns, I believe, that some of the buses were not stopping for healthcare professionals. They'd see people dressed as nurses or people who are in scrubs or medical gear and not stop for them. And they felt that they were being stigmatized for working in the healthcare system. Are you aware of these concerns, and have you had a conversation or addressed it directly with your bus drivers?
Yes, but we've heard of it from a couple of weeks ago. We've heard of it, and again, I can only speak of the BBOC. Those of us that are out there, yeah. None of our people have been doing that, because during the evening when we come back from the north, a lot of some of the passengers that we do bring are nurses, mostly nurses. There's a few doctors that ride with us, but those are in the morning that go home. Mm-hmm. And we don't have any problems taking doctors and nurse, police officers. We, as a matter of fact, in the evening, a lot of our passengers are police officers and some nurses, yeah. And a few doctors. For my bus, I speak to my driver and my conductor, because I frequent the hospital, and I'm friends with a lot of these doctors and a couple of the nurses, and I know the good work that they do for us, because on several occasions they've attended to me, and I am grateful for them. So for my part on my bus, if I hear my driver or my conductor not bringing any of these people, they will go.
Yeah. That's comforting to hear. We do hope that they are actually following through with what you have asked of them. You know, Ewart, I think when you point out the situation, it's a very realistic one. You're not bringing in a full bus of passengers. The cost of running each run does have a price tag attached based on the cost of fuel and the miles that you're traveling. The problem is that public transportation is so absolutely essential. You clearly stated police officers, nurses, doctors, people who need medical care, people who work in government businesses, government departments, people who work in approved businesses. We're not all concentrated in one area. People do have to move from the districts. What's the way forward if we continue on this path where it becomes just too unrealistic for you to keep on paying out of pocket to keep the runs going? What's the best way forward?
It will, Marlene, it will boil down to those of us who those of us who have the love for what we do, and in saying that, we will find a way to continue, because it can only get better from here. I think so far as looking and listening to what the health personnel are saying with those that are recovering from COVID, that the health situation seems to be getting a bit better, and I hope that it stays that way, and those that go across the border still stop, because unless our people stay healthy, our country won't be able to open up. People won't be able to go back to their jobs, and if they continue to jeopardize the whole country, because that is what they're really doing. But by doing that, I know it's hard, but a little bit of hardship for a small period of time does not really hurt, or it won't kill any of us. But like a lot of people said, COVID will kill us if we don't stick to the guidelines.
Yeah. So you are committed to keep those runs going for as long as possible, until things go back to normal.
Yes, as long as again I can only speak of the BBOC. There are some the other operators owners that I speak to frequently. They will hold out as long as they can hold out. Yeah. But again, we turn again to the Prime Minister and say, I mean, we're not asking for anything else. Help us with the fuel. That will help us to stay out there as long as we can, and at least to be able to cover somewhat the cost, of being out there, because we must realize that it's not only fuel. If we go out there and we blow a tire, I mean, if you look at the cheapest tire out there, it's about $430 for one of those buses. So it's not really only that. So when you go there, we have to think about all of that, the maintenance part of the buses.
Now, Ewart, you've put this request out before, and clearly the government was not responsive to it. In your communication with the Minister of Transport, do you feel that you would be able to perhaps get some sort of incentive or assistance in being able to keep the transportation going, or you feel that that door is just definitively closed?
I think if to be honest, and I mean no disrespect to the minister, but I think for us maybe to get any help, or to at least try and get any help, we need to go directly maybe to the FinTech or to the Prime Minister itself, because I spoke to the minister on Sunday for a couple of minutes when we were trying to get the schedule back organized for buses to be on the road on Monday. And he told me point blank and outright that the government is in no position to assist us if we go there and run again. So from his point of view, the operators will be getting nothing. But I'm still optimistic, and I still have a bit of faith if we can maybe sit down with the Prime Minister on a one-to-one basis and let's see if we could work something. I think maybe we could maybe get some sort of assistance through the minister that door is closed.
And so your current, the proposal you were putting forward before, I believe, was for an alleviation of the taxes on the fuel you would purchase. That's still what you would request if you're moving forward and you're still not being able to cover the cost of each run?
Well, yeah, basically because fuel is almost 2/3 of what we spend on a daily basis, and when we were asked to give a little financial report on what we would be looking at, or what each company was spending, and the report we gave were for companies that were only running 3 and 4 buses. And in some cases, for operators running 4 buses, you have 8 employees. You have to have somebody to do maintenance and somebody that works in an office. So 10 people. We had put together between $1,600 a week for salaries. But when you looked at the cost of fuel for those 4 buses to run 7 days a week, we were close to $5,000 a week on just fuel alone. So that is why whenever we ask, we are always asking for the fuel, for the part on the fuel, because the fuel takes 2/3 of whatever earnings we make. So there's where operators through this whole country, there's where we need help with fuel.
Yeah.
So again, that's where we'll stick. We'll stick with the fuel for right now. And as things progress and the economy becomes better, we can then maybe go back and ask for something else, maybe on parts, because again, parts and tires, those are the other 2 expenses that we have that takes a lot from us.
Right. So just remind us before we close off, currently all parts of the country have a bus run that's running.
Yes, as far as I know, yeah, and with the schedule that's out there, yeah.
Yeah. And it's not the regular runs that they normally see. Some are doing one. I think you made us understand that they're doing just 1 run in and 1 run out.
Yeah, yeah, for some companies, yeah, like for the BBOC, we have 2 buses going north and we have 2 buses going west. So we have 4 buses per day out there. Then we have also in the north, we have Maria's and I can't remember which. I think it was only Maria's and BBOC going north.
Okay.
Then coming from the north to Belize City, it's Lynn's, Kamal Bus, and Etilit.
Okay.
Memory serves me right. Then from the west, we have again BBOC. I think Westline is supposed to still be running 2 buses from the west to Belize City and from Belize City to the west also. We have Silvers, I think, running 1 bus, and Mr. Shaw, I think he runs 1 bus from the west. So I think the west really has about 5 buses or so going and coming for the day. And I think from the south, we have James that has 4 buses that is from the south. I think 1 from Griga Line and 1 from Reaches.
And is there collaboration happening between the different bus operators right now? Because I know it's, as much as there's an association and you put forward kind of the united message, it is very competitive. And usually everybody's trying to gun for that, that busy hour. Are you working together to at least be able to offer consistent runs during the day rather than competing against each other?
Like any Marlene, like any big family, you find siblings fighting with each other, but it's nothing that I don't think it's nothing that we can't overcome. But we still talk. But right now it's basically those that who are more in line or has the favor of the minister. Those are the ones that are benefiting more than others.
What do you mean by that?
Try not to, we can't hide from it. We can't run from it. There are some the operators that have their political connections, and they use it at their advantage. Huh? And that has been something within the association that for a long time, since we got back together, that we have been asking everybody for us to try and keep politics out of the industry, because we have seen where it has torn the industry apart in the past, and I guess it's just hard for some people to do that.
If I'm understanding what you're saying, so you could correct me if I'm wrong, that those bus operators who are better connected politically are getting the better and more lucrative runs at this time.
Yeah, I'd say that, yes. I won't run from it because it's the truth. and we've got to face the truth.
And that's
It is what it is. It is what it is.
and that still, to a certain extent, affects what's happening on the ground, today, even in the wake of the COVID pandemic.
Yes, sir.
So what do you
That it does not change.
so what do you do with
We would say it's not so, but it's like you have to live it for. Let's say you have to live it for Louis.
yeah. So what do you
Until
do
you
with
get
these
enough.
concerns, Ewart? Because it's a time where I know that the bus owners are concerned that the runs are very expensive, that they're not making what they used to make. What do you do to kind of balance it out? Because that within the association itself would cause problems, I'm sure.
It does, but it does create a little bit of rift among our members, and they speak of it openly. We have meetings, and even for the last couple of months that we have not had meeting, we have a chat group, and they speak their minds openly on the chat group, and so we know where we stand with our members and with what is taking place, and it's just sad to say that although the Prime Minister says he's trying to keep politics out of what is taking place in the country right now, that's just not the case.
So Ewart, is the next step, I hear you saying very clearly you're going to try to keep the runs going consistently for as long as possible, but at some point, if it continues the way it is right now, because maybe more people are allowed to move as of tomorrow, and that would change it. But if you continue having such a small percentage of people moving around and you have to maintain the runs, how will you get your message beyond the Minister of Transport? Because you say that you weren't able to get him to successfully plead your case.
I guess by then, those that are running and that has his favor, they themselves will start losing more than what they're gaining, and they will come around with the rest of us and say, well, we can't continue without the assistance of the government, and that's basically one of the problems and one of the reasons why I guess we are not getting the assistance, because there's some of these people that are saying that they can do it, and we know of one company that. And I have no problem in saying this because it's the truth, as it was said to our president, and I can say I'm not running from it, is that one company wanted told the minister directly, if you want me to continue running, you need to put the other bus companies off the road, and so that I can run. And I also want you to pay fuel. And for a short period of time, for a couple of days until we were closed down, that was done. So then that kind of caused a bit of problem within the association with some of the members saying, well, how can they do that for one company because this company is demanding a right to run? Take off the other bus company and give me control. So when it was done, everybody said, well, I guess we get what we want.
Now this is a very concerning situation that you're painting now, because this is beyond just being able to cover the cost of your runs. What you're saying very clearly is that those bus owners who are politically connected are getting the better runs, which makes them able to survive a lot longer, but it also means that some of the other operators will be cut out very soon. They won't be able to afford to do the runs. And if the only way you can get a collective demand going and have the minister take your plea to cabinet is by getting everyone to feel the pain or feel the financial pain. It sounds very concerning.
That is exactly what I'm saying. I mean, everybody has to be on the same page. I mean, in this country, with everything that we do in this country, it is divide and conquer, and it's sad to say that some of us are selfish. Some of us don't really see the big picture. In if we work together, we get more done than to try and to pulling against each other.
Yeah.
And I hope at some point that we are able to realize that across the country in everything we do, that fighting against each other and pulling apart from each other doesn't help us in any way. It hurts us more than it does help us. And until we learn to unite and to stand, to make a stand and speak in one voice, then things will be better.
Well, and even beyond that, you know, I know while you think of yourself and the other operators as well, for people who are dependent on public transportation, it has been really difficult to be able to move around, and they need you. It's as simple as that. They need you to be able to.
Marlene, it works both ways. It's a 50-50 thing. Without the people, the investment that we've made going to the banks, borrowing money and so on, I mean, it's a 50-50 thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the public needs us and we need the public. We're not, none is more,
Yeah.
none is more superior than the other. We both need each other.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you're able to find a resolution. As I said, things can change as of tomorrow. We don't know who will be allowed to move or which businesses will be opened. So two things can happen. Either you start to have more passengers moving around, or you're going to have to take your concerns to someone else who will be able to listen and perhaps consider your recommendations. So we'll follow up with you soon and see what happens.
And we can only wish for the best, Marlene.
Yeah.
That's all. We keep our fingers crossed, and we hope that tomorrow we have some sort of relaxation where maybe some businesses can reopen, and we have people starting moving back, those that need to get to their jobs. Yeah. And it will be better for us now, for the operators. But until that happens, we are where we are.
And once again, we just want to remind everybody that to get on the bus, you have to have a mask. You need to sanitize before. These are expectations that they should have. You can't take any standees. You were never allowed to, but you definitely can't now.
Yeah.
And your
more now that we can't do that.
Yeah. And your conductors and your drivers will be wearing masks as well, and cleaning between every stop.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you for the update, and we'll hear back from you soon as to how things are going.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right. Great. So there we had it. That's a conversation with a representative of the Belize Bus Association about how things are going in terms of public transportation across the country. Clearly, there are issues that do have to be worked out there, and we do want to thank Ewart for bringing it to our attention, and we'll follow up and see where it goes from there. But for now, we can say that there is public transportation available from all parts of the country, although at a reduced number of runs. We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, it's time for a brand new recipe with Grace, the Leva with a beat. So stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.